What's up, my dudes? Today I want to talk about aim training, and I want to give you 5 tips that I think are really important for improving your aim. And then after those 5 tips I also want to give you some practices or some exercises that you can use to improve your aim, and which I am using, even though not frequently. I just don't have a lot of time for aim training, sadly, but I wish I would, and if I had more time I would practice with these exercises. Enjoy! So the first step in developing good aim is finding settings that fit for yourself. First of all, there's obviously the button positions, and if you look at those positions, do not copy what I'm showing you here. These are my individual button positions, but I believe that if you really want to get good at this game, you should be playing with at least 3 fingers, if that's possible, because you should be able to move, aim and shoot at the same time. Sensitivity is like the foundation for good aim. If you don't have good sensitivity, you can't have good aim, and sensitivity is a very personal thing. Don't copy anyone's sensitivity. Finding your own perfect sensitivity is just trial and error. You have to try a sensitivity, realize if it fits you or not, and if it doesn't, look, do I over aim? So if I try to shoot this guy, do I over aim too much, or is it not high enough and I keep missing the flicks? That's what you have to ask yourself with sensitivity. The sensitivity might depend on your playstyle, so if you're an entry fragger who looks around a lot, or if you like to hold more passive angles, then you might need a bit of a lower sensitivity, but it's especially dependent on your device. If you have a big screen like I do, you might not need such a high sensitivity, but if you have a small screen with not a lot of space to move your fingers around, you might need a high sensitivity to turn around quickly, for example. But sensitivity is really something you have to figure out for yourself. Nobody can help you with that. Tip number 2, you won't really improve your aim by just playing defuse or competitive mode. For aim improvement, you want to be building up muscle memory, but other than something like arcade or training, defuse is just not good for building muscle memory, because most of the time you will just be holding an angle or something. The time you actually shoot people is like really minimized, so in the time, like if you play 20 minutes of defuse, you will maybe only get 20 people coming into your crosshair, whereas if you play arcade, you can play 2 rounds of arcade in that same time and you can kill 80 people, so you're way more active regarding your aim in arcade, and you can focus on your aim itself way more, whereas in defuse you are like distracted by decision making and all. You're also very likely to develop bad habits if you don't focus solely on your aim sometimes. Tip number 3, try to work on the 4 different aspects of aiming individually. These 4 aspects are recoil control, tracking, so following enemy players' movement, flicking, so quick adjustments to your aim when the enemy has a different position than the one you thought of, and pre-aiming, which is pretty much the same as crosshair placement. When practicing your aim, you always have to remember that crosshair placement is the most important of these skills. If you can pre-aim the enemy well, you won't have to flick, because your crosshair is then exactly on top of your enemy's head when you peek out. Of course, your crosshair placement can never be 100% perfect, because especially if you are rushing a side, there are just multiple angles you have to check, and sometimes the enemies are just not where you expect them to be. But crosshair placement is the shortcut to good aim. By improving your crosshair and thus having to aim as little as possible when you actually see the enemy, you are training your aim with the greatest efficiency. Crosshair placement is reliable, flicking isn't. Try to train these aspects one by one. You have to get good at every one of those 4 aspects in order to develop decent aim. Tip number 4. When practicing your aim, go for first shot accuracy. First shot accuracy means with your first few bullets you are as accurate as possible. You will rarely have to spray your whole mag, because if you have to empty this full 30 round clip, you're most likely going to die anyway, because if your first few bullets don't connect, the enemy is just going to kill you most of the time if they are decent. So when training, always try to go for precise one taps and bursts. This way you will also improve your crosshair placement. And tip number 5, TDM sucks for practicing your aim. TDM sucks for a few reasons, especially compared with arcade. TDM does not train your game sense because you always know where the enemies are going to spawn. So you have this whole area and you know always if you kill someone he's gonna appear in this area. In arcade you always have to worry about enemies spawning in random parts of the map. So you always have to pay attention to each angle and play as if there could always be a player behind you. And you also have to listen to your sound more in order to understand what is actually going on. Reason number 2 why TDM sucks is that you aren't playing on the actual defuse maps. TDM doesn't teach you how to play and hold certain angles on one of the diffuse maps. TDM just has other maps with different angles, and by training to peek those angles you won't practice the angles you will encounter on the diffuse maps. Arcade is also better in this regard because you practice on the diffuse maps themselves. Now, with which exercises can I train my aim? There are a lot of them, and let's start with the training grounds. The first exercise is pretty basic, and this is for tracking. You will need tracking especially in pistol rounds, because those are the rounds when people move the most. So if you only want to train your tracking, then start the moving targets and just follow them without shooting them. This way you will get a sense of player movement and the speed in which you will have to drag your crosshair in order to keep up with the players. Now if you really want to practice for pistol rounds, grab the USP and try to carefully headshot those moving targets. Jesus Christ. You don't need to play this on easy or hard difficulty, because medium difficulty is about the movement speed that your enemies are going to have in real game situations. So easy or hard won't prepare you for the actual movement of your enemies in real game situations. You can also try to spray transfer those bots, even though I would not recommend doing this too long, but if you want, you can try this too. Now when coming to the static targets, those are generally better than moving targets, because static targets represent people that peek into you, whereas moving targets are just people running around you, and you won't encounter those a lot in diffuse. So with static targets you want to do 3 things. First thing is you grab a deagle and you go for precise one taps. Secondly, you get an AK and you go for precise bursts. First shot accuracy is the most important thing here. And last but not least, practice your AWM reflexes on the static targets too. In private server you can just run around and practice peeking certain angles. Just get a feeling for the geometry of every map and make sure your peaks are on point. Also focus on isolating angles, so peeking angles one by one and not exposing yourself to multiple angles at the same time. So I don't want to be peeking stairs like this, where I can also get shot from L, but I want to peek it a bit more narrow so the L guys can't see me. Arcade gives you a more realistic game scenario. Try to go for one taps or quick bursts, and in general just try to improve your first shot accuracy. You can also try battle AWPing or aggressive AWPing in arcade. Arcade will also sharpen your game sense, because you have to pay attention to every angle, because people will spawn randomly, and that will also increase your reaction time. If you want to focus on attacking and defending bomb sites, then you can also play the new escalation mode. It's really good to go deep into bomb site attack and defense. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, hope this helps, and peace out.